Good morning, David. Are you there? Can, can you hear me, David?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah, talk a bit more.
Can you hear me? Is there a sound issue?
Yep, there we go. Coming through loud and clear now.
All good?
Right, so let me just pin you. There we go.
Cool.
Cool. Are you right with this being streamed,
Yeah, no
recorded?
problem. Yeah,
Thank
no
you.
problem. Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you so much. And what time's it there? 6 o'clock in the morning.
it's the clock in the morning. Yep.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, thank you so much for coming. This is being streamed to the London Recovery Coaching Campus, which is a Lero that I've set up here in London to, yeah, help develop the professionalization of lived experience.
Yep.
And it's
Okay.
absolutely wonderful to have you here with your wisdom. So
Mm.
we'll go for 45 minutes, and
Yep.
then I'm going to have to go off to group.
Yep.
But it's really your time. So I'm checking very excited. How are you checking in on
Yeah,
this?
good. Good. I'm an early riser anyway, David, so no problem. Yep.
Okay.
But yeah, getting back into the swing of things after Christmas, and it's full on, but that's all good. I like it that way.
All right. So what would you like us to know about you, David?
I suppose, like a bit of background, as many people will sort of identify with, I come from a lived experience of mental health distress, addiction, homelessness, and incarceration. Spent quite a few years in jails, and still sit very much in that space of working with that intersection of lived experience and criminal justice. And I've been in active recovery for about 18 years and been working with an organisation called Odyssey in New Zealand um, for nearly 14 years now. So not long after coming out of prison the last time, I came into a peer support role in the drug court, and which was a bit of an eye opener. Having just got out of prison and working in the court system. And not really knowing much about peer support. I'd done a basic training. I'd applied for a couple of jobs and been unsuccessful and just kept at it. And then I got offered three jobs, and I picked the drug court one, which was a good move. So the drug court in New Zealand is a little bit different to how it operates around the world. We have a very strong cultural foundation, driven by our Te Reo Māori focus, and we were the first drug courts in the world to have peer support. And so it was quite interesting, coming out of prison and going into a court setting and going into the court for the first time and sitting at the back of the court. I hated it. I've been in that court so many times, usually from in a van from the prison, or you go to court, you end up in the van, you go to prison. It's not somewhere you went voluntarily, but coming into that court and sitting at the back and watching the court start with a waiata song, parakia, a prayer, a mihi, an acknowledgement, and then the judge came in and she says, Dave Burnside, and I jumped to my feet, not guilty. And she said something like, welcome. Um, Glad to have you as part of the team. Look forward to working with you. And I was just absolutely shocked by those words, being welcomed as part of the team and working with the judges, the police, the probation, the treatment services. So yeah, and an amazing experience in a peer role, sort of being able to support people who a lot of who I knew coming out of prison and walking alongside them in recovery, and and just really, I just immersed myself in recovery, in peer academic training, because at that time the only options were you were a peer support or you were a clinician. So I started doing clinical studies and presenting at conferences. and just really immersed myself in it, and grew quite rapidly, and academically and otherwise. And
Can I just pause you for 1 second? Because I
sure,
really want to, I really want to capture the ceremony, for want of a better word, of setting up the courtroom.
yeah,
Yeah. So what were the words that you used? You said acknowledgement. That was the
yeah.
third
So
word you used. Just
it's
slow that down for me.
what we call in New Zealand, when we have any sort of meeting or ceremony or process, we will always start with a prayer, which we call
Great.
a karakia. And that serves a purpose of not necessarily a Christian prayer, it can be, but it could actually be a more traditional cultural prayer, which is what we call a whakawātia, a settling of the space, an opening of the space for engagement, and a coming together. So quite a
Great.
special little thing. And we do it daily. We do it sometimes several times a day. To go into another meeting, can someone please start with a karakia?
Great.
And
So just for our students, yeah,
mm,
we'd say that we'd call that as started to bring sacredness to the container.
yeah,
So we're kind of checking in, an acknowledgement, just
yeah.
kind of a settling of it all.
A
Um,
settling and a coming together and a clearing of the space. So
Clearing, great.
often we will use what we call a whakatauki, or which is a proverb. And my favourite one, and I'll do this in Te Reo Māori, is runga aki ngā mea katoa kia pono pia koe, ko wirimu haki pia te kai tito. So William Shakespeare, above all else, be true to yourself. Yeah,
Ah,
that's a nice thing to say when you come together with a group and you're doing something. So can I just open with you know, William Shakespeare once said, above all else, be true to yourself. So today, can we be honest together? And it's just sets a tone. And then we always sing. We like to sing, and we'll sing a waiata in Te Reo, and we'll usually sing the Serenity Prayer in Māori, and
go
something
for
like
it.
that.
Go for it. Go for it. Let's
No,
create the
no. Or,
space
e
now.
te atua tu kua mai he nā kaumaki. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, etc., etc. So we come together with this karakia. We open that
Yeah.
space for engagement. We sing together, and then our kaumatua, our elder, will stand and acknowledge people. A mihi is it's simply an acknowledgement of others. Instead of someone gets up and goes, "Oh, hi, I'm Dave, and I'm from Odyssey, and I'm the peer support worker here,"
Mm.
and we do da 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 da, and who the hell are you? It's the other way around. We acknowledge others first. I'd like to
Mm.
acknowledge everyone here today. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the participants of the court. Well done on your courage and strength to be here on this journey, all that stuff. So that whole process takes probably 5 minutes, but we've just set a tone. And for me, going into the court that first day, I've done over 550 drug court sittings. So I've done this so many times, and in other settings. But for me, going into that court the first time, I'd never seen anything like that.
Mm.
Never. And what,
So
what happens in the drug,
what?
another different thing in the drug court is people get to speak. So the guy comes out of the cells into the dock, and the judge says, "How you going?" And the guy
Mm.
goes, what me? Can I say something? Because normally you can't. Your lawyer talks. Yeah, yeah. How you going? And you can tell them. You can really tell them. Oh, things are shit. Oh, what's going on? Have a conversation. Have an engagement. And if I
I
want
want
to
to
say
cry.
something,
I want to
no, if I want
cry.
to say something, David, as peer support, all I have to do is just stand up. If I just stand up, no matter what's going on, and just stand there, I know the judge will look over and say, "Do you want to say something, Dave?" Yeah, you got the floor. There you go. And you can come in and say, or they might ask you, "Dave, do you want to say anything to that?" And yeah, it's a real team and collaborative engagement, therapeutic jurisprudence. So to be in a peer role in that
Say that
setting,
again. Therapeutic
ju-
jurisprudence.
jurisprudence, yeah.
What
So
does
it's
that mean?
it's it's therapeutic law, doing
Okay.
justice with, not justice to.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, because normally
Wonderful.
justice is done to people. It's like,
Yeah.
yep, rise, the defendant rise, blah, 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 right? 2 years, stand down. what the hell is that? Where's your voice?
Mm.
So in the drug courts, people have a voice, and it's tough. We just had a conference here, and David Best came over and was one of our keynotes, and he's a natural fit in that space. And we had him in the media as well. So, we want to roll out more drug courts here. We've got 3. We want lots more. And
How's
he
your
just,
energy as you talk about this?
hey,
How's your
oh, I love
how's
it.
your
I,
spirit as you talk about this?
I absolutely love it. I
Yeah, I
still
can
sit on
see.
the I still sit on the steering group for the drug court. I have done for
Yeah.
since it started, and I sit on the clinical and cultural governance group as a lived experience voice, and I'm involved in all things drug court. And that judge I'd mentioned before, that first judge, is now a very good friend of mine,
Oh,
and
wonderful.
yeah, along with some of the others, who may well ring me in the middle of the day and say, "Hey, blah blah blah, what do you think about?" And or we catch up, and so it gives us a voice, David. We actually have a voice. We're used to being um, sometimes peers. Peers are still what I call colonized. The peer role has become colonized by clinical systems. And I think you
Oh,
understand what I mean. They
I
tell
love
us who we
you.
are. No,
I
they
love
tell us
you.
who we are, don't they? And they tell us what we do, and we say, "Shut up! You haven't got a clue. Can I say something, please?" They let us in the room, but they often pat us on the head and stick us in the corner, and then tick a box and say, "Oh yeah, we're peer support were involved. Were we really? Were we really? Was our voice really heard, or was it sanitized in that report? Did it really reflect who we are and what we think?" So a lot of battles, I fight those battles on a daily basis over here, and I see it happening around the world. And I think all we can do is just advocate for who we are and what we bring and stay true to that. So I love it. I teach at universities now. So I'm doing a PhD at the moment on the value of lived experience in addiction recovery and criminal assistance. And I've been teaching at Auckland University and AUT University for about 7 years in the postgrad programs. And when I go in there, I'll have a class of 50 or 100, and I'm like, okay, all that academic stuff in front of you, put it aside. Let's talk about something different. And I talk about social identity. I talk about RECAP. I talk about asset-based community engagement, being part of communities. I talk about connection. I talk about chime. You understand chime, don't you, David? Connection, hope, identity, meaning, and empowerment. And at David Best's suggestion, I'm framing my PhD around chime.
So
So
you know Rabson, yeah?
yes,
From
yes,
Zambia. Yeah, so
yeah.
we were on a call with David, and then Rabson heard chimp. He was talking
Oh,
about the chimp model. So we've
mm,
changed it to connection, hope, identity, meaning, and purpose. So when you're
oh, okay.
working with a community and
Yeah.
so we've got
Mm.
the individuals who are now like kind of peers, but like how is a community of peers going to go out and create recovery capital in community? So Zambia is leading the way with a chimp model.
Yeah, no, that's really great actually, and I mean with purpose. To me, that's part of meaning. I always say meaning and purpose,
Mm,
and but no, I love the work that Rabson does. Own your mind, and that's his
exactly.
message. It's up to you. You choose. Very much Viktor Frankl stuff. No matter what's going on, you can choose your attitude, and no one can take that away from you.
So how do we decolonize? You say peer support, their minds have been colonized. How do we decolonize that so that
Uh, Yeah, I speak a lot. I do a lot of symposiums and peer meetings and lived experience symposiums and colloquiums with peer people. And I rile them up and I tell them that basically you just got to stay true to yourself and use your voice. That moment I mentioned earlier about in the court, sometimes I'll do supervision with the peers or peer coaching with the peers from the drug court, and they'll go, "Oh, I feel like I haven't got a voice," and I go, "Bullshit. I worked there for 5.5 years, mate. You can stand. Why don't you do you stand up in court?" And they go, "What do you mean?" I go, "Try it. Stand up and say what's on your mind, you know? And if you disagree with the judge, stand up and say so respectfully. That's why you're there. So we
So
need
the
to have
so
the
the
courage.
system is tolerates that. So the system has been taught how to, here's someone standing up, they've got a voice.
Yeah, I think the system, it doesn't do this intentionally. It's hegemonic. It
What does
protects
that mean? What
itself.
does that mean?
Hegemonic means that it defends itself at the expense of others. So the paradigm of clinical, academic, Western colonial knowledge, expert knowledge, this is this and that's that, because so and so said so in 1998 and all that stuff. It defends itself. And when
Mm,
someone comes along and goes, hang on, no, I've got a different viewpoint, it wants to shut that down. And it does that in numerous ways. So peers aren't a natural fit into those clinical academic environments. We've got to stand up and challenge it. We've got to pull it out. I use a lot of David Best stuff, so I love it when he says there's three things. He'll say, giving people brochures and written bits of paper is a criminal waste of dead trees. Pointless. Because they just throw it away. They go, oh yeah, yeah, great. Like all your big words and all that, yeah, whatever. And he'll show you research that supports that. Point two, psychiatrists are only slightly better than dead trees. And that gets them going. Boy, I do that. I do this in the universities, and I can tell who the psychiatrist is or the psychologist is in the room because I'll see them go, and I'll say, "Oh, you got a problem with that, mate?" And they'll go, well, the psychiatric model's been around for blah, blah, blah. And I go, yeah, but it's shit. Your stats are rubbish. Your rates of success are shit, aren't they? And I know the figures, and they can't argue with it. Now, point three, David will say, peer support's where it's at. And then he'll go on to tell you why, and show you research and evidence that supports that. So, Project Match, the biggest addiction study ever done, three groups. You had your CBT, you had your MI and other similar approaches, and you had your 12-step and peer. Yeah, the biggest addiction study ever done. The results were conclusive that they were all just as effective. So why does the clinical one dominate? Why does it dominate the approach? We are
and
still
what's
an
the answer
add-on.
to that?
Yeah, we are still an add-on, and yet, and this is what largely what my PhD is on, that we are just as effective or more so for many people. In New Zealand, our cultural approaches can sometimes be all that people need, reconnecting with their culture, a different way, a collaborative way, a family way of being, and then doing CBT and MI and all this other stuff. So it's about what people need, not what we need to give people, to tick a box to say that you have been treated. So the psychiatric, the medical model, yeah, they've got a place. I don't want to burn the building down. I often say that. I do want to burn the building down, but I don't really. I just want a place at the table, an equal place, an equal voice for lived experience, for cultural roles, for rainbow, for disabled, for the old, the young, all working together.
For
That's when we get
humanity.
better. That's when we get better outcomes. Yeah, because we come from a place of compassion, not
Mm.
from meeting some clinical imperative or KPI.
So I'm trying to build relationships with the University of Zambia. And the University of Zambia was started by the poor for the poor back in the 60s
Yep.
after colonialism finished. But the education system is still very kind of has been very kind of colonized, and
Yep.
I don't really want to get into get into the colonizer enemy talk. I just want to kind of get back into
Yep.
the humanity of people coming
Yep.
together, sitting in a
Yep.
container or sitting in a courtroom, and then justice is experienced Yep. Or
Yep.
learning is experience that can be taken back to the community that brings everyone together. And what I
Yeah.
don't like about the current education system is somebody like me that really struggled in the like being ADD and dyslexic and all that. I really struggled in that traditional school
Yeah.
environment, and
Mm.
but I'm not stupid and
Yeah.
I'm quite creative, but my learning style is very different. And I come up against this system
Yeah.
all the time.
And that's the story of our history of schooling,
Mm.
and so, I was similar, David. When I was at school, I learned nothing. I was disruptive, and there were reasons for that. My life was chaos, my family life. I was using heroin when I was 13 years old, LSD, all those substances to
Good choice.
self-medicate. Yeah, self-medicate from the pain of my life. And there were many like me for different reasons that just
Mm.
could not get it together. So I got thrown out of school when I was about 14, went to jail, spent most of my teenage years in jails and institutions. I had no qualifications, and I hadn't listened to a word that was said. But 50 years later, I'm doing a PhD. So obviously I had the ability. I just didn't have the opportunity. The system didn't work for me. So I'm the chapter lead for the Global Freedom Scholars in New Zealand. There are
Tell us
18
about that.
chapters.
Tell us
So
about that.
there are 18 chapters internationally, and more it's growing rapidly. Basically, we support higher education for incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people. They sit under the umbrella of the Incarceration Nations Network and the Global Freedom Scholars. So amazing organisation. And I'd studied in prison. So in my teenage years, when I was in Waikato Youth Prison, I was there for 2 years, and I enrolled in what we call UE English, sixth form English, which I hadn't attained that level at school, but as I found out, I was reasonably smart, and I did this program. It took a whole year, and when I went to the parole board, they were very impressed. They said, "Okay, we're going to release you, but a condition of your release is that you sit the exam for that paper." It's like, "Yep." So anyway, as soon as I got out of it, drunk, drugs, went along to this exam, went there, wrote my name down, walked out, and thought, I sat the exam, I met the condition. Unfortunately, 6 months later, I got another 2 year sentence and I was back in the same prison and tried to re-enroll. And they were very unimpressed with my antics and said no. So I actually did it by correspondence. I did the whole thing again by myself with no support and passed it. And that became quite foundational to have that qualification. It was sort of like, I'm not sure how you'd equate that to. It might be GCE or something in the UK, you
GCSE,
know.
I think.
Yeah, something like that. And then probably 10 years later, I was in jail again and I enrolled in a journalism course. But there was so much drugs in that prison at that time that I didn't really do it. I stumbled through a bit of it. And then 20 years later, I was in jail again doing 6.5 years for methamphetamine, and I enrolled in a uh, environmental science diploma. And I really dived into it, and I did it all handwritten assignments, no reference material, no support, just totally by correspondence, extramural, and I passed it. And that opened the door when I was released. That excited me about education. That spark of we talk about education is emancipation, but and education is hope. But hope is a future focused thing. It's a good thing. I often talk about it's sort of like you've got this car, hope is the petrol. You put a bit of hope into that vehicle, it's going to move.
Mm.
Without the hope, most people's vehicle, they can get out and push it. It's not going to go very far, and it's going to be bloody hard work, but they're not really going to grow or get anywhere. But you put some hope in that vehicle, and you're off. But you still need to know where you're going and who you are. So this is the time process, that connection to something, that spark of hope that lights that engine and brings something to life. that focus on identity, that brutal, uncompromising look at self. Who the hell am I? As we would say here, kuwayo, who am I? And then that search for meaning and purpose and empowerment that comes from that. So that education can be the driver of that whole process. And I just love it. I have about a roster of 25 mentors here, many of them with lived experience, people like me who have studied in prison, but probably half of them are Professor this and Doctor that, just passionate people wanting to support others. And we match people up to people who have come out of prison, who are facing stigma, discrimination, lack of academic literacy. They don't know how do you enroll? How do you get a scholarship? How do you do these assignment things? We support them through that process. I have men that ring me from prison every weekend who are studying in prison, and we just have conversation and build relationship. I send them resources. I go into prisons. So I went into Hawke's Bay prison about a month ago and spoke to the learners in there. I'm going into our women's prison, one of the women's prisons in Auckland, to do the same thing in a few weeks. Same in Otago. I've just got it's very hard to get clearance for me for prisons because of my record. They often say no, but I don't go away. I keep coming back, and as the years roll by, eventually I finally got what we call an MOJ clearance, which means I can go into any prison. And by the way, I sit on the Board of Corrections here. I've been on the Board of Corrections, the national board, for 2 years now. And so I reckon I could have a gold card, like for any prison, just God,
How do you handle ethics? How do you think about ethics and
I think for all of us, ethics and boundaries are a constant consideration. We've got to be thinking about what we do. We've got to follow prison guidelines pretty carefully so we don't identify. We have a process here we call get and got, that everyone who does a prison induction talks about get and got. So when someone says to you, "Oh, hey, mister, an inmate says, could you do this or could you ring that person or anything that's outside those ethical guidelines?" It's no, because once you've done it, you've been got.
Okay,
Yeah, and they're all trying to get you, especially those long termers. They're very manipulative. They're very sneaky. It might start with, "Oh, mister, that could I have that pen you've got, that real fancy one? I've never had a pen like that." And whatever the story is, no, I'm not allowed to give you the pen, because it's got a spring in it. Like if it's got a spring in it, that can be taken apart, could be made into a weapon, could be used to pick a lock, whatever, all that sort of stuff. But don't get got. Stick to the rules, and you have to. And for me, it's simple. I just have to name it. When someone wants me to do anything that's not ethical, I just name it. I just tell them why.
so you bust it, you put it out there. So you have a kind of
Transparent.
code. Pardon?
Transparent. Being transparent.
Transparent, yeah. So you
Yeah.
have a code of conduct, you're transparent
Yeah.
about it, you have a saying called getting
Yeah.
got, and when it happens, how you bust yourself, you say, "Oh shit, this one
Yeah.
got
Oh,
me,"
yeah.
or
That's all you've got to do. Anything that you've done just inadvertently, and that's the best way. It's just say so. Yeah. Because if you don't say so and then it comes out, ooh, it could be
yeah,
trouble. So
okay.
yeah, they're quite dynamic, quite difficult environments to work in prisons, but particularly for people with lived experience, because we're different. So I'm advocating for peer support in all of our prisons, and that will happen. We will see that, and I may well be the driver behind it. At the moment, we have various contractors who run alcohol and drug programs in prisons throughout the country, and sometimes they will have a peer role. So there are a few, but I want them to be in every prison. I want people to have someone who has been in their shoes that they can talk to, that they can look up to, someone that can light that spark of hope in them. Because that chime process, people say when I teach it, I run peer support training all over the country. It's one of my favourite things to do. I've done over 1,000 people in the last few years over here. And when I teach chime, I'll often hear someone say, sometimes I only get 10 minutes with someone. I can't do that whole connection, hope, identity, meaning. You don't have to. If you connect and light a spark of hope, you've just changed their life potentially, because when they walk away and you're gone, they will be thinking about identity. Who am I? Finding meaning and empowerment.
What do you do to support the peers in terms of things like we spoke about ethics, but things like supervision
Mm.
and support for the peer workers?
Yeah, well, I do a lot of supervision. I'm in demand. I turn it down, a lot of them down, but I do about 7 or 8 individuals and groups. My small team at Odyssey, my lived experience team, between them, they do about another 8. So we do 15 or 20 all around the country, sometimes online, face to face, group, and that's basic supervision. We also promote peer coaching, and that's a little bit different to the peer coaching that some of the trainings that yourself and Ray and others will teach. But a peer coaching model is basically self-supervision. We teach it as that the peers in a team will come together once a month, and they'll use various tools to address issues. They'll have a check-in, what's going on, anyone struggling with something, and they'll find solutions amongst themselves and just come
Yeah,
together.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. No,
so
that's exactly what we advocate.
external supervision, peer coaching, preferably education. So you've done your basic training. Over here we have a thing called level 4, which gives you certain advantages when you've completed it. It's more of a what I'd call a support worker training, but it's good training, not necessarily peer. But then what? So we've developed at AUT a lived experience graduate diploma, and all you need is a level 4. You don't need a degree. We're the only place in the world where you can get into that level of academic study with just a level 4 and lived experience. And that will take you, if you complete that, and it's based on lived experience. It's foundations of peer support, enhanced peer support, working with groups and communities, social justice, all those things that sit in our world. And when you've completed that, you can do postgraduate, you can do masters, you can do PhD. But you've opened up that academic world rather than going through their way, the degree, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, all this clinical stuff. You can do your way and access that world. Yeah.
And what's the cost of that? How does that get paid for?
There are scholarships available, and so there is support for that. Some people will just pay for them themselves. So each paper, so the graduate certificate is 4 papers, and they are about 1,000 New Zealand dollars, or about 300 or 400 pound, something like that,
Okay.
each paper. So again, scholarships. I'll often be able to get a scholarship to pay for that from various sources, or some people will just pay for it themselves. They'll be working. I did a bit of
Yeah.
both. I had some scholarships. I paid for some myself, but it makes education and growth accessible,
Yeah, no,
because
no,
our systems, David, and you understand this as someone with ADHD and dyslexia, our systems are exclusive. Our Western colonial systems love to say no. Oh, no, you don't quite fit. Here's a reason why not. Whereas Indigenous systems are full of reasons why. Oh, no, it's okay. We can do this. Oh, here's a solution.
indigenous systems. I fucking love
Yeah,
it.
I
I
I
love it.
fucking love it, and that's I so often speak about that. You look at UNCRPD, the United Nations Convention for the Rights of People with Disabilities. It's full of exclusions. Oh, this should be, but not that. Or some of our laws here, our legislation, they're full of exclusions because they're written by white men who come from empiricist research, professional expert knowledge. You bring in the Indigenous voice, and it just flips around completely. It's collaborative, it's solution focused, it's real, it's family, and it's compassionate.
How do you how did you get around the white male uh projection that happens to you in terms of indigenous stuff?
Yeah, look, it's always there. It is what it is. They call me a play Māori here because I actually speak to the Māori. I've studied for many, many years. In fact, that's how I know some of the judges. We study Te Reo Māori together. And it's a passion for us because it's not just about language. It's actually about understanding a different way of being. And
Mm.
I feel it really enhances my life. But it is what it is. So I often, when I go into a prison particularly, I'll always go in there. Usually it's a graduation, a program, and I go in there as senior. I'm an executive manager at Odyssey. I'm part of the executive. I go there as one of the executive to represent the executive, and they think I'm just one of the big bosses. And I'll go in there and I'll mihi to them in Te Reo Māori, and they'll go, ooh, because most of them are Māori. And I go, ooh, who's this old white guy talking our language? You know? And
Yeah.
then I'll tell them I spent years in this prison and they think I worked there. And it's when they realise, oh, you were an inmate and you speak my language. I've got connection, David. Right there, I've got
Mm.
connection. You know, they're listening to me and we have a conversation on a different level. There's no power dynamic there. There's no subterfuge. You know, there is intimacy, honesty, and connection. And that's why I have a lot of power and a lot of prisons like me coming in. Yeah,
Wonderful. Yeah,
yeah,
I also just go in and bust it. Yeah, I'm
yeah,
the
yeah.
old white straight male. My ancestors were the colonizers. Like I get
Yeah,
it.
well, I
Like,
think it's Andy Briley. So Andy Briley, one of David's PhD students, he's a great speaker, and he talks about being a fish in water. He's like, when I go, because he did a lot of youth prison stuff. When
yeah,
I go into a youth prison, I'm a fish in water. I know this place, you know. I know this
yeah,
world. I know the environment. I know this life, you know. But someone else coming in with some sort of expert knowledge that might be helpful, they don't have that natural fit, you know. So yeah, and there are multiple ways that we can fit in that world, you know, whether it's through addiction and recovery, whether it's through language, whether it's through culture or other factors. But yeah, for me, that criminal justice world, I've spent about 8 or 9 years in prisons, you know, throughout my life course. So I know that world.
mm,
A lot of people will stand in that space and they said, "Oh, I was locked up for 6 months or a year." That's cool. That gives you that experience. But when you've been in and watched the years roll by, that's that that's a different experience
yeah,
of prison. You know that world, and you know what it feels like to be forgotten, to be excluded, marginalised. You know the stigma and discrimination that you live with when you come out of there. And I experience that a lot often in academia. I remember one of my tutors saying to me one day, "Has anyone ever said anything about your criminal record?" And I said, "Not really." He said, "Well, if they do, you tell them to fuck off and ring me." Because apparently my name came up at one of their meetings and they said, "What's this guy doing here? Look at this criminal record. He shouldn't be bloody." And Jim said, "He's a bloody good student. You leave him alone." So I was lucky I had an ally, but
mm,
that's not always the case. So that's what Global Freedom Scholars do. We help support people through that stigma, face that discrimination, overcome the barriers of just access and financing and being able to hold themselves in that environment. And there are some amazing people in with lived experience contributing to literature and evidence and research and bringing a real different take. I'm doing a thing with Curtin University and from Perth at the moment. They're doing a grant application for some funding, and they do this thing called cameraless photography. And I'm like, and it sits under a thing called science meets art. What the hell is cameraless photography? And it's actually these things called cyanotypes. So you use iron salts. You can use the essence of flowers. You don't need chemicals. And you soak images in it. You draw something or you get a picture and you soak it in it and leave it as a time exposure thing and it transfers the image. But it does it in a sort of almost looks like a negative, but colored, and you can create these amazing images. So you've got this artistic process, right? But in doing so, you have to understand the science of what just went on.
mm,
So for people who are neurodiverse, for people who are largely viewed as not suitable for academic environments, they can come up with some amazing art and science work and do the learning that sits behind it and get excited about learning. And next thing you know, they're coming into learning in academia and higher education and bringing with them a different way of learning. So, it's piloted in prisons around Australia, and I want to bring it to New Zealand. But just an example of some of the different ways of learning and challenging that epistemic, colonial, white, academic, clinical approach that our learning institutions have.
So what I've done with my work, if I can just take 1 minute,
Yeah.
is I've created 5 different symbols, and
Mm.
people learn the symbols. So each symbol's got a story. So the first one's like headphones. How do you have a coaching conversation? Then the second one's a set of glasses, watching how someone's doing. The third one is represents a system. The fourth one represents a leadership model, 4 types of intelligence: technical skills, emotional skills, spiritual skills, and political relationship skills. And then the last one is creating the container. So creating the environment, like you spoke about, the court environment, the drug court environment.
Yeah.
And the whole idea around that is you can actually teach with a stick and draw in the sand. So you don't need a classroom.
Yeah.
You don't need
Yes.
all that stuff. You can just sit in a circle and
Yeah.
talk about something in your own language. So
Yeah.
so that's the idea about it.
Now that's
Um,
wonderful, David, and that echoes Indigenous knowledge. It is
yeah,
oral, it is handed down, it is not typed up and written into voluminous pages of paragraph this and section that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And this is where I think, just before we wrap up, is this is where I think technology and AI can help us, people
Yes.
like me and you, because now I
Yeah.
can take the transcript of this video, I can run it through
Yeah.
our closed AI system, and then we can start to extrapolate the data that the
Yeah.
clever people want. Like,
Yeah.
where's the
Yeah.
evidence? Well, here it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Now
I'm very
that's
excited
right.
about
And I think that's the place we all come from, David. You know, you and I and others like us, is trying to open our world to people who have different voices, different knowledge, and we can be of value. And previously we have been excluded by the
it.
expert, the professional, the so-called professional who knows it all, supposedly, but they don't. You know, and that's why I always come back to, particularly as the addiction world and criminal participants, our rates of recidivism are horrendous. Our prison system does not work. You know, our education systems don't work. Our addiction treatment system, if you ask for the rates of success, people will waffle on. They'll try and tell you 50% and that's like, yeah, but hang on, that's on completion of the program. What about a year later? Oh, a year later, 30%. Okay, what's 5 years later? About 10%, if you're lucky. That's not very good. That's CBT, MI, all this, TC, all this stuff. 10%. Really?
And
Shit,
how much did it cost?
yeah, that's shit. So how about you listen to me and maybe we can get to 20 or
Hmm.
30. Maybe there are other people who can bring something to this instead of you owning it all and taking all the money and building this whole system of exclusion and marginalization and hegemony, killing off alternative approaches. Um, and how about you stop doing that shit and let us have a bloody say here? Yeah, because we've got something to say, David. Hey, we got something to say. I'm not quiet. They're calling
Yeah,
us
no,
the
yeah.
quiet revolution. Our Minister of Mental Health is saying, I want to acknowledge peer support and lived experience. Oh, thank you. He says, I'm calling them the quiet revolution. And I'm like, don't fucking tell me to be quiet, mate. And he said to me, I didn't mean that. I said, yeah, but you said it. And
Yeah.
that's what people heard, mate. You heard, sit down, shut up, you're allowed in the room and do what you're told. Get fucked. I'm not doing that. I'm going to get up and say something.
Dave, thank you so much. How are you checking out? And can we do this again, please?
Yeah, no problem, Dave. No, happy to talk anytime. And I think these connections, these international connections, are really important. And and there'll be things I can learn. I'm sorry I haven't been to the meetings that you sent me the link for, because over here they're at midnight on a Friday night,
No, no,
and
no, no.
nearly
Relax,
every
relax
Friday I
about
say,
that.
"Oh, I'm going to try and stay awake this week," and I will come along. I will at
Yeah,
some
yeah, no,
stage.
no, 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 relax. It's that's another thing, that time zones, there's an
Yeah,
arrogance in the time zones, like we'll work on UK time or American time, and then we
yeah, yeah,
forget how difficult it is for the other half of the world.
yes.
So
I know.
so I have got that to my radar, and
Yeah,
just the fact that you're here is fantastic.
yeah. Always good to catch up. I think we've got another meeting in a week or so with Dr. B and Andrea, and we'll see if she turns up this time. Hopefully.
All right, mate. Listen, lots of love and thank you for everything you're
Yeah,
doing in your time. I check out with a lot of gratitude. How are you
yeah.
checking out?
No, very, very much the same, mate. It's my day's starting here. I'm feeling really good. I'm excited, and I've got some cool things to do, and I'm really grateful that that's my life. Yeah, and great to catch up with you.
Lots of love, mate. Talk to you later.
All right.
Bye.